Hello.
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for filling out the form and sending over your picture. Got that. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm thinking you're good. You're ready to go. So if you're
I think
ready to go,
so.
I'm ready to go too. I
Yeah,
mean,
let's
there's
go.
awesome. Sometimes people want to chit chat and I'm like, well, she seems like she's just ready. So
Yeah, I think so. I'm hearing but we'll work through that.
you're hearing your what? You broke up for a second.
My dog paw at the door, but
Oh,
well,
yeah. I had to invest in crates myself.
I know.
Yeah. So
So
it's okay because I didn't really hear it.
I have the sound machine on. Maybe I'll turn up the sound machine a little bit more.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to introduce you as Rachel Lynn Fox, who has now you've recovered from premenstrual dysphoric disorder,
Yeah, it's a
right?
mouthful. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Just in how I was going to introduce you, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't incorrect. I know it said you're healing from it, but I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Okay. You ready?
Yeah, I think I said healing, like, because it was at the title.
It's healing. Yeah. Healing. Where did you put that? Let's see. I've got it on here. So
I know the
overcoming
title's
PMDD. Yeah.
okay.
So
Yeah,
or healing from PMDD.
yeah.
So definitely recovered. Okay.
Yes,
Because
yeah.
yeah, it's like some people get into it and maybe they haven't, or they have someone that they helped or whatever. So
Yeah,
just wanted to make sure I had it in my mind right because I read over this, but sometimes
sure.
my brain farts out. That's okay. Okay. Okay, I'm going to have a moment of silence, get myself centered, leave a blank spot, and then I'll just welcome us in and we'll go from there. Okay. Welcome back to Relatively Damaged by Damaged Parents. Today we have Rachel Lynn Fox with us. She has recovered from premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and she's also a PMDD, which is short for premenstrual dysphoric disorder, holistic hypnotherapist coach. She also works with RTT, which is what's called rapid transformational therapy, which uses a combination of hypnotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, otherwise known as CBT, and neuroscience, along with coaching and menstrual cycle awareness. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, I've heard of PMDD before. I think someone I know has it. I don't remember if that's the name, but I cannot remember the symptoms. And I'm assuming that there are probably listeners listening that are like, what in the world is that?
Yeah. So I am so glad that you have heard about it because when I self-diagnosed myself, it was the first time I had ever heard about it. And it was the first time that any of my friends, family, mother, sister, uh, aunts, cousins had heard about it. So premenstrual dysphoric disorder affects 1 in 20 women in AFAB. It's 5% are suicidal. What happens is right after our ovulation, during our menstrual cycle in that month, our estrogen drops. And during that time, there is a massive hormonal shift. That next phase is called our luteal phase, and that phase lasts until we bleed. And during that time, because the hormones are really changing, the progesterone hits the highest at that time, there is a massive turbulence of what is known as this mood disorder. And it's been said that it's a hormonal imbalance, and we're not able to regulate it really. Just like if you were going to go into a doctor's office anywhere across the world and you said that you had hypothyroid, everyone would give you Synthroid or levothyroxine. Well, with PMDD, can take up to 3 to 8 years to get the diagnosis. And you go to your GP, you go to your endocrinologist, you go to your OBGYN, your psychiatrist, because no one knows what to do about it. And so the solutions are this sort of SSRI cocktail combination, hormonal therapy, birth control, or to the extreme to remove your ovaries and get a hysterectomy. So it's really an obscure topic. And if you think about how we're all bleeding every single month and we don't know anything about not even really our menstrual cycles, it's my passion to not only share my story about how I'm healed from it, but then also to share to the PMDD community that there is healing and hope.
Yeah, I just am wondering how many women are misdiagnosed. They think they've got a solution, but then something comes up later. I mean, you said it took what, 3 to 8 years
Mhm.
to for
On
someone
average.
to get a diagnosis, and I can't think of, these people are suffering this entire time and
Mhm.
they're thinking they find a solution and they don't find a solution. After having experienced it and then healing yourself and finding the diagnosis, do you think there might be a faster or easier way for women to be able to pinpoint this may be the problem?
Yeah, so the symptoms that come up, if there are those who suffer from severe PMS, it could very well be PMDD. So what it looks like is right after this ovulation phase, you can experience a roller coaster of emotions. Some women actually suffer the entire 2 weeks until they bleed. And that looks like extreme rage and anger, uh, mood swings, deep depression, anxiety, panic attacks, binge eating, chronic fatigue, extreme sensitivity to rejection, plummeting self-esteem, crying spells. It's really it's like so much for I think the medical community to even touch. But what happens is when we bleed, we go back to ourselves. And so the misdiagnosis can also be bipolar. So you go from being the extreme worst version of yourself every 2 to 3 weeks, and then almost like do a recovery, if you will, to come back, bounce back to yourself. You can able to tackle the things in your home. You can, get your emails out on time at work. You have good relationships. You're just functioning at your peak self again. You can accomplish, you can go on vacation, you can plan the parties that you want to, you can have intense conversations with your boss. But
Mhm.
anything inside that window is really taken as a perceived threat to oneself during that time.
Now, is this something that happened like once the menstrual, or can happen when the menstrual cycle starts? Or is it something that happens later in life? Like, for instance, does this woman who's experiencing PMDD even think that there's something wrong? Or how would they know if it's normal for them? You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
So,
Like, I
yeah,
don't know if someone doesn't give me feedback, I don't know if that it's not
sure.
normal?
Yeah, well, I'm 45. And so I was in high school in the 90s, and I definitely had battling depression and moments of binge eating that I thought at the time that it was actually just bulimia. And also moments of rage and anger. But when we're not talking about our menstrual cycles, and no one for sure was at all like, telling us to even track our cycles, um, that, there was so much lack of awareness then. And really, that's one of the reasons why there's so much misdiagnosis and the silent suffering going on. So if you're seeing yourself battle, or maybe your daughter or the loved ones around you that you're close with, or even like a coworker, that you see that, 2 days of the month, or I'm sorry, 2 weeks out of the month, they're functioning, they're at their prime, they're happy, they can go out, they're having a good time, they're exercising, like everything seems normal. And then 2 weeks later, you see a shift. And that shift it's really, really debilitating. It's very, very lonely because you don't know who to talk to. You don't know what's safe. You don't even know how to explain it to someone. I mean, because we all have our periods. So how do you say, no, mine's really, really, really bad? Or, when you start opening up the conversation about mental health, you sort of put yourself in this category of, are you like, are you a whole person? Can I trust you? So you put yourself out there in this way that you have to almost be ready to embrace the feedback or the possible rejection of what's going to come back from you, especially from employers. If you're trying to let them understand, where these lows can really go to, there's really, really so much suffering.
Yeah. And you brought up mental health, and I think I had seen um on the form you filled out beforehand, I'm thinking trauma may have something to do with this. Now, does well, let me go to mental health first. I mean, if we had better discussions around mental health, or maybe even taught it in schools, do you think it would be easier to catch some of these things?
Absolutely. If we had menstrual cycle awareness in our health classes, this would educate us in such an empowering way.
Mhm.
100%.
And what about mental health? Would that also help with, because so I'm hearing you say like the menstrual cycle awareness would be extremely helpful. I'm also wondering if that mental health or emotional um education, really educating our youth on emotional things would be helpful for
Yeah.
diagnosis. Like, would that have further helped?
It would have awakened me through my, 20 years of trying to figure out what my issues were, right? Of like, why can't I get over this? Why am I angry? Why did that trigger me so intensely? Why do I feel that way when, you know, someone walked away? Like, there's a deep internal dialogue that's always going on during these 2 weeks, that it's like really, really low and dark. So
Mhm.
yes, to answer your question, if we had the awareness to support with our menstrual cycles in our health classes, to say that, are you experiencing this? You might be feeling this way, because there's about like 9 to 13 intense symptoms that one can experience. And so if we're not talking about it, you really just think that you're a teenager struggling with anxiety, primarily right before your period. But if you don't know to track, if you don't know to watch your cycle, to talk to your mother, your father, your aunts and uncles, grandmothers around that who are around you, you are really, really left alone. And so, bringing this to the forefront of conversations in our home is so important, as mothers, to be leading our children to being able to talk about these conversations, that it's just not the bad cramps that you have and go take some leave and sorry, and like, maybe you can sleep in a little bit longer, but you got to get to school. Like, this is a whole nother category of suffering.
Well, and I think too that maybe there's this idea that, we talk to our children about the behavior that's coming from it, thinking they have some control, and not thinking of, oh, well, maybe there could be this hormonal issue going on. And then the child might beat themselves up, I'm thinking, or the person, child or not, thinking, I should be able to handle this. I'm fine that those weeks. I'm not fine this week. This is just my life.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, there in Also, you had said something about healing on a subconscious level. Now, what does that mean for you, and how does that help with PMDD?
So, going back to the trauma piece that you mentioned, so I am a voice that is speaking to the PMDD community right now, in as sort of like a forerunner in the space to really say that there is a link to unresolved pain and unresolved trauma, and that results in our PMDD symptoms. Um, my life is a perfect example to show that once you dissolve the pain and you get back to the root cause, can one truly heal? And that is why I've now made my life's work to declare and to work with those who suffer with PMDD. Um, so it's a really big conversation because Western medicine doesn't really want to support that kind of thinking yet, but maybe we are on the rise and massive shifts of awareness. But those are really big conversations to have. But what rapid transformational therapy is, as you mentioned, it's hypnotherapy, a blend of neuroscience and cognitive behavioral therapy. So when you go back to the subconscious old programming that has usually evolved when we're 0 to 7 years old, and we take in a perceived moment of pain or a belief or if, even a feeling. Feelings are so important, what we took in as a child. And then what we interpreted that as, that no one cares about me. I'm lost. No one's coming to look for me. I'm not enough. I must not be important enough. I'm different. Maybe someone was bullied. There's so many moments of snapshot moments in our life. So it's not, the word trauma can be such a trigger. And so it's really important to say that there's two really big differences between big trauma and little trauma, the macro, the micro, because instinctively everybody wants to say, oh, well, I wasn't sexually abused. So when we really peel back the definition of trauma and to really understand that it's not based by an event, but what we perceived it as, what was the environment that we were in and what we told ourselves and what was the belief that we took in. And so when that programming begins to run in our life, and when that's really the grounded message, that's what we hear, and how it then affects those, once we start bleeding, to thinking about our self-image and our lack of self-worth, and the suicidal rate. Like it can play in so many ways, but how it spans out our throughout our life is it can really, really take head through any massive shifts. Maybe a child being born, maybe your child left to go to college, maybe there was a death in the family, maybe there's a divorce. So it's really different how the shifts can happen, because what will begin to arise is that familiar feeling that's always connected back to the root cause.
Mm. When you were talking about trauma and you were using terms little trauma and big trauma, it reminded me of what I learned, and that is trauma. I can't define a trauma for you. You are the only one who can define a trauma for you. And I think, too, maybe in some ways, at least in our society, maybe in some of our families, that even if something is traumatic for one person and not another person, then the judgment is made that it maybe shouldn't have been traumatic for the person that it is traumatic for. And I think that takes away not the emotion, the experience of healing in that moment, or even the chance to heal in that moment.
Love
And
that.
I really like what you said about how it continues on, and then it turns into the stories that we're telling ourselves. So, like you were saying, even if there wasn't a rape or wasn't sexual trauma of some sort for PMDD, it would make sense that a lot of people, in my mind, from when you're saying this, would think, oh, there must have been some sort of sexual trauma. But that's not necessarily true. It could just be, I'm not good enough. I'm this, I'm that, which is what I was hearing you saying.
Exactly.
That is really interesting to
I love
think
how you
about.
say, yeah,
Because those stories, darn it, those stories, they can
yeah,
really impact
they
how
are
we
ancient
think.
stories that we are
Yeah,
all running on. And until we
yeah,
expose them and reveal them for what they are and what we perceived then, and now with our adult eyes, can realize that we almost like go back and rescue our little child, our little us, that little girl in me, and to go back and rescue her to let her know that she's not there anymore. That's not me
yeah.
anymore. And until you reframe that message and really rework to restructure that with the reprogramming of the mind, it's really, really how you can set yourself free from all emotional pain, truly.
Right. But how does someone know if they've got these subconscious things going on? I mean, especially in the Western world, we're not taught to look at that very much. I think we're getting a little better at it, maybe. But and if it's subconscious, how do you even start to recognize it? Is that something that the RTT and the hypnotherapy helps do? How does that work?
Well, it definitely requires a lot of awareness, right? Our triggers, anything. We're in traffic and we are panicking because we're going to be late to work. You're late. You missed a meeting. To you, your credit cards are stacked out, and it's whatever is triggering us is our wake up call to heal. And
Okay,
so
so
whenever we feel that shift, the fear, the anxiety, uh, the messages of, I don't want to wake up today. Like I'd rather, just hide. I'd rather, just disappear. I'd rather disconnect. I wish I wasn't here. It's a lot of negative self-talk. I don't like
mm,
myself. I don't love myself. I'm not good enough. And so it's so important that we, as early as we possibly can, we're instilling empowering conversations into our children at such a young age, because it's the words that we've always wanted to hear become the words that we really need to tell ourselves,
mm.
even as adults now, because
So in
you are the most influential person in your life. We have been taught to believe we need validation, we need external, but once we have that self-love within, we can be really restored to the best version of ourselves, truly, truly living shame, guilt-free, fear-free, and it's all an involvement, right? But what the work of healing through PMDD, it gets you to the point where you're no longer suffering these debilitating symptoms. And then you work, sort of with your limited beliefs outside of these moments to, get you and all of us where we're trying to evolve and get to.
Yeah, and it sounds like you could almost use the trigger as a trigger for yourself to say, "Oh, maybe there's some work I need to do right there because
Mhm.
I am triggered and what is it?" And maybe not right in that moment, but sometimes we
So,
have to go back and investigate, right?
yeah, but and just to be clear, these triggers that happen during the luteal phase are massive.
Mm,
Like are massive. So not just like I'm a little bit pissed off. You're talking full on rage for hours.
okay.
It doesn't necessarily mean, a physical altercation, but and really what that anger piece is, it goes back to a child wound that never felt that they were able to be heard. So that response that is coming out is a response to that little child who never felt that they maybe had a voice in their home or with their loved ones. And
Okay,
so,
so they're getting great big signs then, and then they're probably feeling terrible
oh, and
about.
then the shame that comes after is debilitating suffering, like days of crying spells, like you don't want to get up, you don't want to face your kids, you can't do anything because like you just became the worst. You are a monster in your home, you know.
Okay, and
Yeah.
you were able to heal from this and not take hormones and not take medicine, just by working through all of these tough things, I guess, is what
Well,
that's kind of a question of mine.
yeah. So in my own self-discovery, right, because I wasn't ever linking it up to my menstrual cycle. Um, and so I lost my job during COVID. And during that time, my daughter's school also closed, not offering remote learning. And it was a stressful time for the entire world. But in my little home, it was it was scary at times, just for how what we were all, sort of susceptible dealing with. And that is when my symptoms really skyrocketed. Like I said, it was a shift. Like it was a
Mm,
massive shift that happened. So through that about 18-month period, I went and like tried talk therapy. I went on antidepressants, anti-anxiety. I ruled out gluten. I did supplemental therapy. I did dietary changes. It knocked off alcohol. And I even tried ketamine therapy because
wow.
I really knew I was suffering, and I never suffered. There was a link of suffering my whole timeline, and
Mhm.
I knew that. But this was unprecedented pain. And I am still in a relationship, but that relationship came to a halt because he left.
Mm,
And after a night of rage, and I was left facing my two teenage daughters and had to really figure out what this was. And thank God there was a moment of clarity, and I Googled rage before period. And that's how I discovered PMDD.
mm.
And I went into a Google hole of discovering what PMDD was. I joined every Facebook group that I could, and I was determined to find what this really meant for me. At one point, and this is a conversation I have with my clients so much, is that the moment you get diagnosed, you feel so validated because you're like, oh my God, this is it. This is okay. So now what? Okay, like now I know I'm 1 in 20. You can tell your employer, you can, tell your husband, you can tell your kids, like, I'm not bipolar, like this is what it is. But then you're left in a totally isolated journey about how to work through this. And because everything I was reading on every forum and every page was something that I already had tried, I was really scared that
Okay,
I
so
was just,
you were, like, super excited that you felt like you had this answer, and dare I use the word fix, maybe just because you had this answer that then you were gonna be, "Okay, there's gonna be a fix here," and
I was like,
then
oh,
you tried everything.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
except having my ovaries removed.
Mm,
And also birth control at the time. So I again went into a whole, like, I just for days and days and days, all I did was Google all of the symptoms and the pain, and understanding the root cause and healing and treatments. And it sent me to YouTube pages about rapid transformational therapy. And I then discovered that that addresses the root cause of pain.
Mm.
And I just immediately sent all these videos, information to, I don't know at the time, he says he never technically broke up with me, but I'm like, you definitely did. So my ex-boyfriend at the time, and he, was like, what do we do? This is definitely you. Like, what haven't we tried? Let's go for it. And one session later, profound healing at the
Through with
deepest,
you
deepest
utilizing the
level
tools that
of
you,
RTT. Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah. So I'm like, sign me up. Like, I need my life back.
Hmm.
Everything else is falling apart. Like, there is no way I could have gone back to work. There is no way I could have continued being a present mom. There is no way that I could have just really gone on living. When the dark gets so dark, it's
Yeah.
really, really all you know. And it was very, very scary in some moments. But because I was at such at a deep cry and a deep, deep need. And it's just, and it's sad that like some people have to get there, that plummeting wake up call. But, there was also nothing in my vision to know that this could even be what it was. So
Yeah.
understanding, finding out more about PMDD, and then working through rapid transformational therapy. And after one session, the shifts were so massive. So what really happens regarding PMDD is you're healing the root cause, you're addressing, you're finding it, you're exploring it, you're discovering it, you're unpacking it. But then when you get to this point, you can now see it through your adult eyes. And when you have your next luteal phase, instead of these triggers, you now see it in a totally different way. You see how you used to respond. You see that it was just a rejection of yourself. You see that you were so scared that you didn't believe that you were safe. So there's so many messages that you take on during this time. And until you undo them and really heal and work through them. So the beautiful piece about rapid transformational therapy is that you're given an audio recording to listen to 21 to 30 days. And so that is all about the transformative work of the mind and the neuroscience piece, and just working by repetition until it really, really becomes the new programming, the new coding, and really the new you that's setting your old self free.
Now you use these tools and then became an expert in them, because now you're teaching and you're helping other people heal from this. And so I'm thinking, what are the top three tools or tips? I mean, now that you have been through this process, and we know that if someone's suffering, they definitely want to come see you, Rachel Lynn Fox. I mean, you just seem so knowledgeable, I have to say it. But what would be the top three tools or tips? Or maybe in this case, what would be the top three things? Notice this before you come see me. Or even as you're making your appointment, take a
Yeah.
look.
Well, first of all, healing is brave. And, it takes a very large holding in your own pain to get to the point that you're even having a first free call, because you're so scared. So it's being brave to make that first step to saying, I need help. I want help. I want to heal. Two is to be really, really committed to the journey. Rapid transformational therapy, it's a 2-hour session. It is rapid, but you have to be committed to your own personal healing and your freedom. And, if you're still 1 foot in and 1 foot out, I find women who are, about 35 and up have suffered so much that they'll do anything. Not all the time. I mean, I do have really, amazing clients who are younger as well, but sometimes it's not that bad yet. So, it's just, you have to be really, really committed to the work. And three, having these conversations, maybe with this great support system around you, because these healing moments, if you're blessed to have the support around you, a loving family, sister, brother, mother, father, who already know, you know, the household environment, if you will, uh, they will be able to and want to see you through. And so by having, that partner, that boyfriend, it's really important that you walk with them through it, that what comes up in the sessions that you're talking about it, because really the partners of PMDD are on a whole nother side of suffering. If you think
Mm,
about what happens in a home, the children are suffering, the husbands, the partners are suffering, they are experiencing their own trauma. So it's really important to include them in this journey so that it will really essentially help them to heal as well.
such great wisdom. You guys can find Rachel Lynn Fox on social media everywhere. It looks like it's simply just Rachel Lynn Fox. Check her out. Totally worth it. Can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this episode. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you.